I'm so proud they're my friends, and I look forward to learning from them as they describe a strategic planning situation they're entering into and how they would use the strategy chart.
Great. My name is Beth, and I will be taking you through a relevant example of how to use this strategy chart as a way to organize and to win. So the example that Lindsay and I will be presenting is how we would use the strategy chart to pass the Clean Dream Act. How many of you have heard of the movement to pass a Clean Dream Act after the rescinding of deferred action for childhood arrivals? Okay, great. And how many of you are inspired by the movement of especially young, undocumented folks in the US, and that's one of the reasons why you're resisting and you're in this room today? Okay, great. So our intermediate goal, and remember that's the demand in the that's immediate to what we're trying to do that Heather was mentioning before, is to pass a clean version of the DREAM Act where there are no compromises and no one is used as a bargaining chip. So the longer term goals associated with passing a clean version of the DREAM Act is a pathway to citizenship for all immigrants, as well as, because the DREAM Act is really focused on young people's opportunities in the U.S. We, as alumni of the U.S. Student Association, we especially believe that universal free public higher education is absolutely part of ensuring that all young people, regardless of documentation status, can have access to higher education. In the short term, because we are Massachusetts residents, we want to make sure that Representative Seth Moulton publicly supports the Clean Dream Act and commits publicly to not making compromises with the Trump administration on the border wall, on increased border security, and other proposals that he may have. So I'm going to pass it over to Lindsay to talk about the organizational considerations.
Great. So the DREAM Act is one of these issues that Beth and I have worked on for probably close to 10 years. It's been a long, long fight, and we seem to have to keep coming back to it over and over. And there have been many organizations that have contributed to that fight. But locally here, the organization that we're connected to that would be taking the lead on this work is a local immigrant youth organization made up of undocumented youth and allies. So there's an organization here called the Student Immigrant Movement. So things that we have to put into the fight. We have 70 active members across the state that's active, that come out to meetings, that participate in our tactics regularly, 70 active young people. We have 3 staff members that are paid by the organization. We have office space in downtown Boston. We have a list of 1,500 supporters who participate in various events or tactics that we run. 250 of these people are in the 6th Congressional District where Congressman Moulton is based. So things that we want. We want to increase our membership through this fight. We don't have a whole lot of members in the North Shore in the 6th Congressional District, so we want to identify 15 immigrant youth on the North Shore that can become members of our organization through this fight. We also want more money, as do many of our organizations, so we want to identify 50 new individual donors through this fight. And internal problems that we need to be aware of. One is that our staff is going through some transition right now. We have a small staff, and a couple of those staff members are moving on, and new staff members are coming in to replace them. And that can create a little bit of instability or a real need to do some conscious planning around those transitions. And as I mentioned before, we have few leaders who live in the 6th Congressional District, so we're really going to need to reach deeply into our bases and rely also on our allies to help us find constituents of Congressman Moulton that can be part of this fight.
Okay, so now that we have determined what our intermediate goal is, and we've done an inventory of what we have in the organization. Now we're going to focus on how to build the power of people to win this fight. So the people who are directly affected and we want to develop as those new leaders are undocumented youth in the 6th Congressional District in Massachusetts to get Congressman Moulton to commit to no compromises with the Clean Dream Act. So we know that this group alone is not going to be able to win the fight. And so that's why we need to bring in lots and lots of allies. I'm just curious, does anyone here live in the North Shore in the 6th Congressional District? Okay, maybe just a little bit outside. And so we know that we're gonna need a lot of allies to be able to win this fight. There was a very recent ballot question that passed in Salem, Massachusetts, reaffirming sanctuary status in that city. That's where Seth Moulton lives. So there's a already organized base of people who have worked on a similar issue. And so a very natural first ally who we want to bring into the campaign to make sure that their congressman does not compromise would be the Friends of Sanctuary organization that just passed the local sanctuary ordinance just last Tuesday. Another set of organizations that have been active in the fight for immigrant rights in Massachusetts but aren't themselves immigrants, or not all of them are immigrants, include the Massachusetts Teachers Association. That's the biggest teachers union in the state. They make lots of endorsements in elections and are one of the very important political players in Massachusetts. There's a coalition focused on education justice in Massachusetts called the Massachusetts Education Justice Alliance. They care about they care about students and teachers, and since this bill is really focused on immigrant youth, they also seem like a natural partner. There's an advocacy organization called the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition that works on policy, that has worked with DACA students for years now. And finally, we also have the UMass Board of Trustees, which is the decision-making body for the biggest public education, higher education body in the state. The center, unfortunately, we do have some opponents to neutralize. In Massachusetts, the Center for Immigration Studies, which sounds innocuous enough, has been opposing a sanctuary-like bill in the state legislature for years on end, and we can assume that they will be active in this fight, pressuring Seth Moulton as well. And so these are some of the people who we want to build coalition with and build the power to ultimately win the fight in the long term. And now we're going to move on to the target himself.
So we already have revealed who the target is. The target in this case is Representative Seth Moulton. He was first elected to Congress in 2014 with 54% of the vote. He challenged an incumbent and was elected in that year, and then had no challenger in 2016. We've noticed that he's really trying to increase his profile leading up to 2020. He's been doing a lot of events in New Hampshire and is certainly trying to elevate his profile nationally, and probably has some big political ambitions.
Great. And so one more piece about Seth Moulton is we also know that one of the key things that he cares the most about is that he is a veteran, right? That's how he was able to win that uphill fight. And so, as Heather was saying before, this isn't just a static set of categories, but it's kind of a flow chart. So if you know one thing, then you might want to go back to another column. And so since we know that Seth Moulton is a veteran and cares a lot about veterans, we might want to bring in some advocacy organizations that he is already close to and bring them in as allies. Okay, so now that we have thought about the the goals and our organization, the people who we want to organize and develop the leadership of, and who our decision maker is. Now we can jump into talking about tactics and what we're going to do. What are some things that our constituents and allies could do to put pressure on Seth Moulton to reject any compromise on the Clean Dream Act?
So I think that one thing that we should do right away is set up a meeting with the congressman or with his staff. If we can't get a meeting directly with him, we can have local undocumented youth and allies share their stories, ideally people who are voters in his district, and that will probably give us a sense of where he stands and what his position is right now before we start escalating our tactics. Assuming that he's not with us right out the gate, generating an online petition or an in-person petition and getting large numbers of voters in the congressman's district to fill that out. Getting some presidents of local colleges and universities in his area or the UMass Board of Trustees, getting them all to sign on to a letter to the congressman to make him aware of their support and encouraging him to support the Clean Dream Act.
Okay, one of my favorite things once you've already gathered all of those petitions is to organize an in-person delivery of those petitions. And that's a great way to take the momentum that you build online and make a decision maker feel the pressure in person. So I would invite lots of organizations that are natural allies and partners to deliver those petitions with us to his district office in Salem. And then lastly, there's a tactic called bird dogging. Has anyone heard of it? Okay, so bird dogging is when you look up when a town hall might be, and so I would get his town hall schedule, have some folks from his district show up to the town hall and ask some pretty pointed questions to get a firm commitment, yes or no, to supporting a Clean Dream Act. And so we'll actually take maybe two suggestions for tactics.
And I think we can do that as so we can applaud their work, which is incredible. And maybe let's do a debrief together. They really are. Didn't they do a fabulous job? Thank you, Beth.